there is very likely going to be a second American Revolution. It may occur in the next few years, or might not occur for the next several decades. I'll tell you how this revolution is going to occur. It's not going to occur with the right wing being against the left. It's actually going to be the other way around. It's going to be the left versus the right. How this is going to happen? Actually, it's not going to really be right versus left. It's going to be the people versus the government. I'll tell you how this is going to happen. And it's not going to occur like how some people thought about it 5 years ago under Obama. It's actually be the complete opposite way. America will have a right-wing dictatorship. It won't be Trump. I'll tell you that. Trump might be, more authoritarian right-wing, but he's not a dictator. He may be a jerk, but he's not a dictator yet. That remains to be seen. Could it be the president after Trump who becomes a fascist dictator? Or might it just be a military coup that occurs and the people get really upset and try to restore democracy? I don't know exactly how it's going to happen. But knowing what we know now, there might be a right-wing dictatorship that might, heck, even a left-wing dictatorship. Doesn't matter. We might have a dictatorship in about 15, 20 years from now. We might. This is not a guarantee. This is a possibility. And this dictatorship will strip away people's basic rights. The motive for this dictatorship might be, there might be a big terrorist attack, God forbid, like huge, and this may lead the government to take away our basic rights. And this will cause the people to rebel. Like, I'm not talking about phone call being spied on. I mean literal censorship of the internet, you being punished for criticizing the government, like what's going on in Syria, like violent crackdowns against protests. I'm talking about like that. And people of all political spectrums, whether being left or right, are going to be extremely repressed. And this will lead to mass revolt. I mean mass revolt. You're going to see people organizing their own militias, organizing their own rebellion movements, maybe even a unified rebellion, like what's going on in Syria right now. And most likely, more likely than not, it's going to be a right-wing dictatorship that takes hold in America. Or maybe, America's likely going to have a second American Revolution. Sorry, not Civil War, American Revolution. We might have a second revolution. It might not even be a citizens versus the government. What might happen, actually, there's two different possibilities, where it's Americans versus the government, people versus the government, or the people versus the corporations. America might decide to basically get corporate influence out of the government, and they may do so, unfortunately, I wouldn't say violent means. They may do so by boycotting entire companies, especially that try to control the government. So you might see a huge collapse in companies that are basically controlling the government. Oil companies. You might see a lot of people boycott certain oil companies. As more information becomes available, there might be a time where the public realizes that a certain corporation or groups of corporations are controlling the government, and therefore are making laws that do not represent the interests of the people. This will lead to mass protests, boycotts against these companies, and the government may step on the people's side and side with us, or the government may, due to being under control of these corporations, lash out at these people, and the corporation might try to turn America into a dictatorship. So like the business plot back in 1934, we might have a fascist dictatorship because of corporations, because of special interests. This may actually end up happening. How this will happen, it remains to be seen. But either way, either a corporate dictatorship or a right-wing fascist dictatorship could take place in this country. I mean, America is not in as bad of a situation as Germany, but politically we're actually worse. Germany was a fairly stable nation
like America, they had a democracy, they had a pretty strong, stable government, even though after the Weimar crisis they had economic issues, but politically they were more stable, and they still fell to the Nazis, and look what happened. The thing here in America is a lot of people have guns. This actually may be the only factor that may prevent a dictatorship from taking over. Actually, because of social media and the internet, there is a chance that any dictatorship that is in its infancy may actually be halted because of the people. However, if the government decides to just ban social media, you know what's going to happen, right? There's going to be no way of organizing against, an authoritarian regime. Look what's going on in Russia and China, and even some countries like Saudi Arabia. I mean, Saudi Arabia is not really a dictatorship. It's a kingdom, but actually no, it's not. Syria. Sorry, I'm about to say Syria, not Saudi Arabia. But Syria. Look at Syria. Social media is what caused the revolution in the first place, and that's why the government in Syria basically banned social media, because people are organizing against the government. This could happen here too, eventually. As the people start rebelling or showing very strong anti-government sentiment, like much more than now, you're going to eventually see social media being censored or completely not allowed. Websites like YouTube, Instagram might be allowed, but under heavy government censorship. There is actually censorship going on. Certain YouTube videos do not allow... YouTube does censor some videos because, they have a certain set of rules that you have to follow when you post. When this revolution happens, as I mentioned, it will likely be not right versus left or left versus right, but the people versus dictator. Like that. And if a dictatorship does take hold, like maybe a military coup, the people will actually then try to restore the government back to the way it was before, maybe making it a little more democratic, so to prevent something like that from ever happening again. Maybe giving less power to the military or, the general who did it. Or if the presidents decide to become a dictator and orders troops to, impose nationwide martial law, that will definitely likely start a revolution. Because, America is a very, very democratic nation. And when people realize their rights are being threatened, they're not just going to sit idly by and do nothing. They're going to rise up. And especially if a lot of people are armed, and the military or, if the military starts, or, whoever starts firing on the civilians, under the order of the president, or whoever's in charge, you're going to have people firing back. And you could have a second revolution / a civil war. And then what are the people going to do? They're going to organize militias, and this militia could actually organize its own military to fight either a military coup or, a dictatorship. I mean, never say never. People say, oh, this could never happen in America because we're a democracy. Actually, it can. It happened in Germany, which was, a fairly democratic nation. It could happen here too. It definitely can, and I'm actually scared that America could actually turn into a dictatorship, and we might have a second civil war. It might not be like North versus South. It actually may be people versus fascism, or people versus the, dictator. I mean, it might not happen in our lifetimes. It might happen in another, in 50, 60 years. It could happen in 10 years. It could even happen in 5. All the thing is that something might happen. Maybe it will never happen, but there's a possibility that America could have a second revolution. But it will likely be a pro-democracy movement. Because once your rights are eroded away, you're going to want your rights back. Of course, it's completely just. Like what the people did in Syria, to try to oust Bashar al-Assad, they were justified. I mean, after all the atrocities Bashar al-Assad did, the people were completely justified in trying to remove him from power. And I honestly hope all dictatorships around the world crumble. North Korea, Belarus, Uzbekistan's dictator. I hope that all the dictatorships around the world crumble and the world truly becomes democratic. And the fact that Trump has in the past, supported these dictators, that's not good. Especially, even Bashar al-Assad, while he's left-winger, while he's on the left, he's a dictator. It doesn't matter whether you're on the left or the right. The fact is, if you infringe on the rights of your people, you don't deserve to be in power. Narcissists have no place in power. Actually, there should be a law that any person with mental health issues may not take political power, especially if it's narcissism. Narcissistic personality disorder is the most dangerous thing to humanity. Greed and power. Do not mix it with politics. Greed in politics is like oil and water. You need to have a strong leader, but who would respect everyone's rights. And not, infringe on one group over to help another. That's just wrong. That's racism. That's discrimination. Whether it's racism against a person's color or ethnicity, or against their gender, or against their, against disability. You have all forms of racism, discrimination. You have racism against a religion. You have racism against, race. And you have discrimination against people with disabilities. It's still ongoing. I mean, I went through it really badly in public school. It was really bad. And that inclusion director was basically a dictator. And I questioned her authority. I, did everything I could to make her understand my point of view. And in fact, she just punished me for standing up for myself. You know what I did? I rebelled against her. I openly mocked her. Not mocked, but I openly questioned her authority. I openly berated her for how she treated me, which just got me in more trouble. But I felt good about what I did because I was completely helpless, and the fact that I had some power, that I did something, it made a slight difference, but it made it worse for me. But the fact that I let her know how I was feeling and that I yelled and cursed at her made me feel better, because I showed her that I'm not going to accept what you do without doing anything. I'm gonna give you a hard time for how you're treating me. And that's what people need to do all over the world. People all over the world, whenever their rights are being infringed, they need to rise up. Like the Tiananmen Revolution in China in '89. That was a good thing because, look, they were standing up for democracy. Whenever there's a pro-democratic movement, I support it. I support the secession of Catalonia. I support the secession of Kurdistan because it's for democracy. Democracy is the most important thing in the world. People must have their basic rights protected at all costs. Well, not at all costs, but protecting a person's rights is the most fundamental thing in the world, and everyone should respect one another's rights, especially somebody in power. Thank you for watching. Bye.